How's everybody doing? Tinkering with Harleys. The last time I put a video up was about 2 weeks ago, and the reason you haven't seen one is because I haven't had anything to show you. And reason being is we're still waiting on parts. We're still waiting on a transmission case to get back from the machine shop. We have gotten some parts, but not enough to put anything together yet. Some of the parts we did get, they were the wrong parts, so they had to go back. So hopefully the next video I do, we're going to be able to show you something, and hopefully it's going to be able to put that transmission back together, because I'd like to get that out of the way. Now, I want to thank all of you who have subscribed. This has gone far beyond my expectations. I truly like the suggestions you're putting in, the questions, and you guys and ladies that are subscribing. This has been great. It tells me that the videos are being watched and people are enjoying them enough that they want to subscribe. And if you are watching these videos and you do enjoy them, by all means, please subscribe. Keep the suggestions coming. Keep the questions coming. That's why I put this channel up, to answer questions and to show people how to do different things in the most economical, correct way possible. And I do everything my own way. I've been around this I'm in my 7th decade now. I've been doing this for more than 50 years. And I have tendency to do things the old school way. Now, I know there's a lot of modern tools out there and things like that they say you have to have. In some cases, yes, that is true, but not in all. So the way I do things may seem old-fashioned to some people, but they're very basic and they work just as well as the new. So what I thought I'd do today is give you just a little bit of background on me. Now, I've been blessed. I've been doing this for over 50 years. Like I said, I'm in my 7th decade. I still ride. I still am healthy enough to work on bikes. I don't have health issues, thank God for that. And I've seen a lot of my friends, due to age, health issues, things like that, not be able to ride anymore, which each year we kind of lose more and more guys that way, which is kind of, that's a little bit depressing. But it is what it is. It happens to all of us. But at any rate, what I figured I'd talk to you about is my own background. Now, the first Harley Davidson I got, I was 16 years old. I got it for doing yard work. A guy had a 1935 flathead. It was a 45. It had a 3-speed tank shifter with a suicide clutch. And every time I'd go in the garage, I'd be staring at this thing. It was covered with dust. It had sat there 10, 15 years, something like that. And one day when I finished working, he asked me if I wanted the motorcycle instead of getting paid. Well, I could have been knocked over by a feather, and it didn't take me long to respond. I mean, it was an immediate yes. Now, this thing had sat 10, 15 years, didn't run. Tires were flat, but it had tube tires, and the tubes hadn't gone bad, so it took a bicycle pump and was able to pump up the tires so I could push the thing out. And what I had to do, because my parents wouldn't let me have a motorcycle, I pushed it to a friend's house, and I pushed it about 2 miles, and we put it in a friend's garage, and we started working on it. And what we found was, the cylinders were real tight. It could turn over, but we didn't want to turn it over and do any more damage to the rings. So we shot some transmission fluid in the cylinders, let it sit for 2 weeks, eat the rust and stuff away. And after 2 weeks, we got it to fire up. Didn't run great, smoked like hell, but it ran, and I did a happy dance. I was just ecstatic about the whole thing. And And that was the beginning of my education, the day that bike started. Um, Now, in those days, there weren't bike shops. There were Harley Davidsons, but where I lived, there was no bike. There was a Honda dealer that was selling, little itty bitty Hondas, and they had a load of those, and they sold those for next to nothing. But that was the only bike shop, and if you went in there to try to buy Harley parts, they kind of looked at you like you were out of your mind. Um, so basically, what we did was, if there was something wrong with the bike, you rebuilt it. You didn't buy new because new was hard to find, especially for a 35. So you rebuilt things, or you fabricated things, or you went to a junkyard and took them off another bike and put it on yours. So this is where I started to learn. Now we rebuilt this whole thing after a while, after discovering. Well, when we first got it started, the carburetor leaked like hell. So I got an education on linkered carburetors, because we took that thing on and off 6 or 7 times and rebuilt it 6 or 7 times before we got it right. So that's how I learned about linkers. And when we did get it running, it would only run for a certain amount of time, because neither one of us knew you had to turn the generator on. Yeah, we thought it came on automatically, but it didn't. You had to turn the generator on, otherwise the battery wouldn't charge. And then we learned about advancing and retarding the timing in order to keep the bike running and getting it started and things like that. So eventually we got it all right. We actually did rebuild the top end, never rebuilt the lower end. And I rode that bike for about a year. And I wound up trading it for something else, but that's where my education started. Now, I met up with some guys that were older than me. I stopped at one of the local bike hangouts one day, and these guys were old. And when you're 16 years old and a guy's in his mid-20s, he's old to you. But these guys knew bikes, and they started helping me with things. And they would let me work on things and make my mistakes, and then tell me what I had done wrong and show me an easier way to do things. And that's where I learned a lot of what I was doing. I learned far more from my mistakes than I ever did from my successes. And these guys would let me make the mistakes on purpose so I would learn. So I learned a lot from those guys. And they took me under their wing. They didn't have to do what they did, but, and I had the oldest bike in the bunch. Those guys all had knuckleheads and panheads. I had the only flathead 45. So it was a fun time. I learned an awful lot. Now in the late 69 or 70 or sometime around then, the first aftermarket company came out, and that was AEE, and they sold wheels, springers, all kinds of chrome parts, engine parts, and some of the stuff was good and some of the stuff was crap. But once that came out, that's what sparked the chopper age, and the sky was the limit on what you could do with your bike. That's when the extended front ends came. That's when you started raking your necks and putting length in your down tubes in your frame. I mean, as far as your imagination could go that you could put into your bike, you were able to build a bike that was, completely your own. And that's what everybody did. Now, some bike shops started turning up in the 70s, and they sold the aftermarket parts, which made it easier than getting it by mail order. And you could get stuff there. They had Chrome Exchange, where you could exchange your parts, and they already had Chrome parts, and you paid an extra like $20 or whatever it was, and then you'd be able to get Chrome on instead of taking all your parts down to the chromer and waiting forever for them to come back. So, and I did work in a bike shop for 2-3 years, but there wasn't enough business to keep it going, and I couldn't make enough money to support my family, so I had to move on to something else. But I never got out of the bikes. I kept building them in my garage. I would either build them for myself or I would be helping somebody build theirs. So I've been in it all these years. Now, I've only owned two bikes, two brand new bikes in my life. Every other bike I've had has been used, and I owned a lot of bikes. Some I would keep for a season and then sell it. Some I wouldn't even keep for a month and I would sell them, and I already had another project going on. But I had a lot of knuckleheads and I had a lot of panheads. Now, the first new bike I ever owned was a 72 shovelhead, and I bought that in Passaic, New Jersey. It was sitting on the showroom floor, and back then, the showrooms, they only held maybe 2, 3 bikes. They weren't these big, huge dealerships that they are now. They were no bigger than a storefront or a gas station. And Harley Davidson had just come out with the Super Glide. They called it the Night Train. And the price tag on it was $2,500. And I had come into some money, and I sat there and I negotiated with the guy, and I got it down to $2,200. Put gas in it, and I rode it right out the front door. And took it to my then girlfriend's house, to her garage, who she later became my wife. And I ripped the whole bike apart in her garage. Took the frame, took the motor out of the frame, and built a stroker. So I've been in it all these years. But back when I started, guys built their own bikes. Nobody worked on their bike except them. Guys would help them with them, but everybody built their own. And you could go any place. And, now they have bike nights and stuff like that. Back then, every night was bike night. You could go to any club or any place where bikes gathered, and you wouldn't see any two bikes that were the same, because each bike was built by the individual, and they were all different. They were extensions of that guy's personality. And it was great to see, because you saw all kinds of bikes. Now, I've been fortunate enough to see all the changes over these years, and I've gone along with them, because I started with a flathead, went to knuckleheads, then to panheads, then to shovelheads, then to Evos, and now we're into twin cams. I've yet to get into an M8. And I don't know that I'm going to go that far. And with each new design and each passing year, Harley makes them a little bit better, a little bit harder to work on, but they do make them better. I mean, they're more powerful. They have more horsepower. They're way faster than the old 74s, and significantly faster than a 45, I think. The top speed on an old flathead was only about 40 or 45 miles an hour with a 3-speed transmission. So basically, I've just kept up with it as Harley has changed, and change is good. Nothing ever stays the same. And as they improve on these bikes, I don't like all the improvements. I mean, they've done a lot of things, like now they're rolling computers. I don't like that. But that's just me, because that's the generation I'm from. I like the things that are from when I was younger. But the second bike that I got new was the 2000 that I have now. And it's carbureted. I don't like fuel injection, and people will tell me I'm crazy, but I don't like fuel injection. I like to be able to work on my carb. Where I live, you can go from 8,000 feet down to sea level. And when you start having drastic changes like that, you have to adjust things. I've seen the fuel injection not adjust to it. With my carburetor, if it needs to adjust, I just need a screwdriver, and I get under there and make the adjustment, and I'm good to go. So at any rate, that's just a little bit of background on me. I am now retired. I've been doing this out of my garage for about 10 years now. And the first video I made, I did on urging from friends and family. I never thought to do any videos, and I never thought it would go anywhere. And the first video I made, I thought sucked. That's got more hits than any video I've made, which was my very first one. And I realized that there are guys out there that want to work on their own bikes that haven't had the background that I've got. And, when I learned, there weren't schools. You learn by trial and error. Now there's schools, but there's some things you just can't learn in school. There's some things you can only learn by doing and making mistakes. And once you've made that mistake, you usually and shouldn't make the same mistake twice. You learn from it. So it's not a failure, it's just learning not how to do something. And all these videos that I'm doing, they're to try to make life easier for everybody that wants to work on their bike. Now, I know there's guys out there that are in my age group that probably got out of it when they were young to raise families and have gotten back into it, but want to work on their bikes because it's expensive to take to a shop, but don't want to undertake it because they've changed so much over the years. This is where I'm trying to help. And I'm trying to stay within the confines of the common things that go wrong with Harleys. Unfortunately, the last couple of videos I've done, they're not quite so uncommon. We've had some unusual things that have come up. So, but you're seeing me do that. So that's pretty much going to do it for today. If you like these videos, by all means, hit subscribe and hit like also. And for those of you that have subscribed, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it. And until the next one, thanks for watching, and everybody be safe out there.